Look who's here. What a pleasant surprise. Welcome to the channel. First time around? Hit subscribe and pass this video to someone who could use a good one. And please tell me where you're watching from. It's like a travel adventure in the comments. Let's get this party started. My name is Leo Benton. I'm 43, and up until 6 months ago, I truly believed I had achieved the life I'd always dreamed of. I held the position of executive director at Crawford Financial, lived in a stunning home just outside Boston, and had 2 amazing sons along with a wife I loved for over 20 years. At least that's what I believed. In truth, the thing I held most sacred wasn't love or family, it was pride. And ironically, it's what ultimately kept me afloat. Gemma and I met during college. She was studying art history. I was grinding through a business program. We couldn't have been more different. She thrived on imagination and unpredictability, while I found comfort in order and routine. Somehow that contrast created a perfect harmony. We balanced each other effortlessly. Shortly after graduating, despite warnings from both sides about moving too fast, we tied the knot. Those first years were magical, scraping together funds for cheap getaways, staying up all night dreaming about the future, navigating job changes and tight budgets side by side. When Gemma found out she was pregnant with our first child, Dylan, we were overjoyed. A year later, Ryan arrived, and just like that, we felt complete as a family. I threw myself into advancing my career at Crawford. Starting as an account manager, I worked my way up to executive director through long hours, tireless effort, and unwavering resolve. Gemma, in the meantime, put her dream of becoming a museum curator on pause to raise the boys, though she never entirely stepped away from the world of art. She stayed involved, organizing local exhibitions, keeping up with her old colleagues, and nurturing that part of her identity. Whenever I missed dinner or came home late, she'd say, "You're building something that matters, Leo. We're in this together." And I took her at her word. Why wouldn't I? We were the kind of couple others looked up to, still affectionate at PTA meetings, still laughing at each other's corny jokes, still sneaking in date nights when we could. As our boys grew older and became more independent, Gemma began to reinvest in her own ambitions. She landed a part-time role at the Garner Museum that eventually grew into a full-time job. I felt nothing but pride watching her rediscover herself. Our house once again filled with stacks of exhibition guides and art publications. The boys would poke fun at her for the non-stop gallery visits, but I knew they admired her just as much as I did. Then everything began to shift last Thanksgiving. Gemma's younger sister, Delilah, came to spend the holiday with us. She had just come back from 3 years abroad, serving as a nurse with Doctors Without Borders in some of the harshest regions of Central Africa. Delilah had always been the unconventional one in the family, intelligent, adventurous, and fiercely self-reliant. She was 10 years younger than Gemma and carried an air of calm strength I had long respected. After dinner, while the others relaxed, Delilah and I found ourselves in the kitchen doing dishes together. I asked, "So, what's next for you?" She shrugged as her hands moved through the soapy water. "Thinking of staying put for a while? Maybe get a hospital job nearby, find a place, try settling down." I nodded. "You're always welcome here while you figure things out." She looked up and smiled warmly. "Thanks, Leo. It's good to know there are still people out there you can count on." Looking back now, I had no idea how much I'd come to rely on that steadiness. No idea how fast everything I thought was solid could unravel. While others saw us as a model family, smiling in framed portraits, receiving compliments on our seemingly perfect life, what none of us realized was that the foundation had already started to crack. And by the time we noticed, it was far too late. The real shift came when both boys left for college. Dylan had taken a gap year to recover from a football injury, so he and Ryan ended up starting together at State University. I remember helping them pack, hauling out storage bins, stuffing pillows and clothes into their trunks. Gemma fretted over whether they had enough towels and extra bedding. "They'll be fine," I told her, slamming the trunk shut. "They're grown men now." Dylan, tall, broad, and built like a defensive end, wrapped his mother in a tight hug. "Dad's right, Mom. Quit worrying. Ryan, always the softer one, promised to call every Sunday without fail. Before they pulled away, I gathered them both close and placed my hands on their shoulders. Your mom and I have worked hard to get you here. Take advantage of it. And remember, Benton men know how to stand on their own. As their tail lights vanished down the street, Gemma and I remained in the driveway, hands still clasped. The silence that followed was deafening. The house suddenly felt too big, too still. I poured myself into work to dull the emptiness. Crawford was in the midst of a major expansion, and as the head of the operation, the pressure was intense. 14-hour days became the norm. By the time I made it home, Gemma would already be asleep or buried in her latest museum responsibilities. Then, one evening, I came home early, something that rarely happened. I had just closed a major deal, securing a multi-million-dollar pension fund contract, and I was eager to celebrate with my wife. I stopped by the Thai place she always loved and picked up her favorite dishes, along with a bottle of that Pinot Noir we both fell for during our wine country trip to Oregon 5 years ago. When I stepped inside the house, I found Gemma seated at her desk in the home office, completely absorbed in whatever was on her laptop screen. She didn't even register that I had come in. I placed the food and wine on the kitchen counter and walked over silently, placing my hands softly on her shoulders. She jumped, instantly slamming her laptop shut. "Jesus, Leo, you startled me!" "Didn't mean to," I said quietly, surprised by how tense she seemed. "Thought I'd surprise you. Brought your favorite." She gave me a tight, unnatural smile. "That's thoughtful. Just let me finish up here." As she got up to join me, I caught a glimpse of her screen, just a brief flash of a message thread. One line was still visible. "He has no idea. See you tomorrow." A cold wave of unease rolled through me, but I forced it down. This was Gemma, my wife for over 20 years, the mother of our boys. If I believed in anything, it was her loyalty. That belief would prove to be my first misstep. Little signs began stacking up. Changes in her routine that no longer made sense. Late nights and weekend events that her job at the museum supposedly required. Her phone, always in her hand, never left unattended. Every call was hushed, every message answered behind closed doors. Our shared calendar filled with vague entries, museum event, but not a single name or detail. I wasn't the kind of man who jumped to conclusions. My career had been built on logic, on facts. So I didn't confront her based on feelings. I chose to gather evidence. One Tuesday afternoon, I quietly cleared my schedule and left work early. Instead of driving my familiar silver Audi, I picked up a rental car and parked it across from the Gardner Museum. Closing time was 5:30. By 6, most of the staff had left. At 6:30, Gemma finally appeared. She wasn't alone. Next to her walked a tall man, gray at the temples, with a perfectly manicured beard. I didn't recognize him. He wore a tailored blazer and moved with the effortless confidence of a man used to taking what he wanted. At his car, a sleek black Tesla, he placed his hand lightly on the small of her back. She leaned into him as though it were second nature. My gut twisted as I watched them climb into the car together and drive off. I followed them carefully through the city, making sure not to be seen. Eventually, they pulled up outside the Ritz-Carlton. A valet took the car, and they went inside, his hand now resting casually on her hip. For a moment, I was ready to lose control. I wanted to storm into the hotel, find their room, and demand answers. Demand to know how this man had the nerve to touch my wife. But that's not who I am. I don't make a scene. I don't lash out. I plan. So I went home, poured myself a generous glass of Macallan 18, waited. The GPS tracker I had placed on Gemma's phone a week earlier confirmed she was still at the hotel. She didn't come home until 10:15 p.m. I was sitting in my office, lights low, nursing my second drink when she walked in. "Leo, you're home early," she said, clearly surprised. "Long board meeting tonight?" I asked, stepping into the hallway. My voice was calm, though inside I was barely holding it together. "Yes," she answered quickly, dropping her bag by the door. "We're finalizing the winter show. You know how Phil likes to talk." I raised my glass, taking a deliberate sip. Funny, I didn't realize board meetings were held in the Ritz-Carlton's presidential suite now. Her face went pale. Leo, let me explain. Don't bother, I interrupted, raising a hand to stop her. I saw you. With him, whoever he is. Gemma sank onto the bench by the front door, her whole body collapsing inward. It's not what you think, she said faintly. I let out a bitter, hollow laugh. After 20 years of marriage, that's the line you go with? It's not what you think? I turned and walked away before she could say another word. I needed air, space, time to process. Because the truth had finally landed. The life I thought we had wasn't real. The days that followed felt like living in a cold battlefield. Neither of us yelled. There were no fights, just a heavy silence that weighed down every room in the house. We passed each other like strangers. I moved into the guest room, lost myself in work, and stayed late at the office to avoid sitting across from her at the dinner table. I needed time to think, to decide what came next. By Friday night, she finally broke. She cornered me in the kitchen, wedging herself between the fridge and the counter. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a careless ponytail, a ghost of the woman she used to be. We have to talk, Leo, she said, her voice shaking. This silence, it's destroying me. I poured myself a glass of water, leaned back against the counter, and looked at her, waiting. Fine, speak. He's just a friend, Gemma said, referring to the man with the beard I'd seen her with. A colleague from the museum. Most friends don't book hotel rooms together, I replied, my voice cool and sharp as a blade. Her eyes dropped to the floor, shame replacing defiance. It's not simple, Leo. We've been drifting. You're always lost in your job, and I'm always tied up at the museum. We've become strangers under one roof. I placed my glass down with enough force to make her jump. So instead of talking to me, you decide to sleep with someone else? That's your solution? Tears welled up as she shook her head. You don't understand. It's not like that. Julian actually hears me. He pays attention. When's the last time you really listened to what I was saying? I let out a dry, bitter laugh. I'm listening now. Trust me. I hear everything loud and clear. She took a step closer, laying a shaking hand on my arm. I had to resist the instinct to pull away. I've been thinking, she began again, her voice more composed this time. Thinking about us, about what we truly need. There was something in her voice, measured, rehearsed, that made me tense. What if we tried something else? She asked. A different kind of relationship, one that allows us both a little more space. At first, I didn't understand. Then it clicked. You're suggesting an open marriage? My voice was flat. She gave a small, deliberate nod. A lot of couples make it work. It removes the secrecy, the pressure. We can set boundaries, guidelines. I stopped her cold, my voice soft but sharp. Let me get this straight. You've already been unfaithful. And now you want me to endorse it? That's not what I mean, she insisted. No, that's exactly what you mean, I snapped. My wife wants permission to keep seeing her affair partner. The words tasted like metal. Her expression stiffened. I'm trying to be honest, for once, about what I need, about what you might need too. No, I said firmly. This isn't about us. This is about you, and whatever's left of our family. Her jaw tightened. Our boys are adults. They've moved on. Now it's just the two of us. And yes, this is what I need. I'm not going to stop seeing Julian. I'd rather you hear it from me than find out the hard way. The only thing left to ask is, can you live with it? 2 decades of marriage, and it had all boiled down to this. An ultimatum dressed up as a modern compromise. I looked at the woman I'd once built my world around, and what I felt wasn't rage. It was cold certainty. I need some time, I said finally. Her voice was steady as she turned to leave. Don't take too long. I'm done waiting around for life to happen. The moment she walked out of the room, everything became clear. I didn't need time. I already knew exactly what came next, not for her sake, but for my own. I just had to prepare. That Monday, I called Frederick Donovan, my attorney and a friend since college. Frederick, I need you to draw up divorce papers, I said, and I need them expedited. Whoa, Leo, Let's slow this down, Frederick replied. We need to plan this properly. Massachusetts uses equitable distribution. If there's been infidelity, I have the evidence, I interrupted. Just get it started. My second call was to a locksmith. By Tuesday afternoon, I had changed every lock in the house. I moved exactly half of the funds from our joint savings account into a new one under my name. Not a dollar more. Even though Frederick had advised me to protect myself by taking more, I chose not to. This wasn't about punishing Gemma or trying to ruin her financially. I wasn't seeking vengeance, just closure. I wanted to leave with dignity. While she was away at her usual museum board meeting, I carefully packed her most immediate belongings, her clothing, bathroom essentials, jewelry, and anything she would need right away. I made sure to handle her art books and supplies with particular care. Anything she wanted beyond that could be picked up later, with Frederick present to ensure things stayed civil. At exactly 8:30 p.m., I heard her key turning in the lock that no longer worked. There was a pause, then more forceful, increasingly frustrated attempts to open the door. Eventually, she rang the bell. I opened it and stood in the doorway, blocking her path. When she spotted the stacked boxes and suitcases behind me, her face twisted, from confusion to fury. "What the hell is going on, Leo?" she snapped. "This," I replied calmly, "is me refusing to live by the terms you've chosen for us. You made your call, now I'm making mine." I handed her an envelope. Inside were the divorce papers. "Frederick will be in touch to handle the division of assets," I added. "It's all been done fairly." She looked down at the envelope, then up at me, her face tightening with disbelief. "You're not really doing this. This is our house." "It was," I said. "Now it's mine. You can go stay with Julian, or book a hotel. That's up to you." Her shock quickly turned to fury. "You don't have the right to shut me out. I live here too." "You should have thought about that before the affair," I answered evenly, "and before treating an open marriage like it was some enlightened offer." "You selfish son of a bitch," she hissed, tears now threatening to spill. 20 years together, and this is how you respond to a tough season? You throw me out? A flicker of guilt stirred in me, but I didn't let it show. A tough season means arguing about vacation plans or who forgot to take out the trash. Cheating and giving ultimatums cross a different line entirely. "I'll fight this," she threatened, shaking the envelope. "I'll make sure you come out with nothing." "You're free to try," I replied without emotion. "But the prenup is crystal clear when it comes to infidelity." That hit her like a slap. We'd signed the prenup at her father's insistence, meant to protect their modest art assets. Now, ironically, it protected me instead. She stood silently on the porch as my phone buzzed in my hand. Delilah was calling. "Hi, Delilah," I answered, still watching Gemma through the doorway. "Yes, I got your message. Tomorrow works." "You can stay in the guest room as long as you need." Gemma's eyes grew wide. "You're talking to Delilah, my sister?" I ignored her. "Great. I'll see you in the morning," I said, ending the call. "You're close with Delilah now?" Gemma burst out. "Since when?" "She called me looking for you," I said. "I told her what happened. She's apartment hunting in Boston, needed a temporary place to stay. So I offered her the guest room." Her voice went shrill. "You're throwing me out and letting my sister move in?" "Delilah didn't betray me," I said quietly. Then I closed the door. From the window, I watched her stand there, motionless for a long time. Eventually, she picked up her bags and walked toward the car, shoulders shaking with sobs. There was no sense of victory, just a hollow calm, maybe even a sliver of relief. The hardest part still lay ahead, beginning again. Delilah arrived the next morning with a single suitcase and her nursing credentials. She already had an interview lined up at Mass General and seemed eager to settle down after years spent traveling the world doing humanitarian work. "The guest room's yours," I told her as I carried her bag upstairs. "Take whatever time you need." She gave a small shake of her head. "I still can't believe what Gemma did to you." Delilah walked a few steps behind me. "You and Gemma always looked like the real deal," she said. I gave a slight shrug. Apparently that wasn't the case. Over the next several days, the house shifted from a place of tension and silence to one of ease and quiet comfort. Living with Delilah turned out to be unexpectedly effortless. She was tidy, mindful, and low maintenance. Unlike Gemma, There were no abandoned coffee mugs scattered across tables, no Sunday mornings disrupted by NPR blaring from the living room. When she landed her job after the interview, we celebrated with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. We sat together in the kitchen, laughing and swapping stories over pad thai and cold bottles of Singa beer. "Gemma called again," Delilah said, casually twirling noodles around her fork. "She wants me to talk you out of all this." I raised an eyebrow. "And what did you say to that?" She met my gaze evenly. "I told her that maybe she should have thought about the fallout before she got involved with Julian." I lifted my bottle toward hers. "To honesty." "To honesty?" she repeated, clinking her drink against mine. The following week passed in a blur, long hours at the office, legal meetings with Frederick, and steady movement on the divorce. Frederick was building a strong argument, and Gemma's earlier defiance was giving way to realism. She'd brought in her own lawyer, and the talks about the house and our shared finances were now civil, if not particularly warm. Meanwhile, Delilah had started her shifts at Mass General, usually working nights in the ER. Some evenings I'd come home to dinner waiting on the counter, along with a post-it explaining how to warm it up. Other times I'd make her breakfast after her overnight shifts. She'd come in exhausted but at peace. One night, I was buried in merger documents when Delilah appeared in the doorway, holding 2 tumblers of scotch. "You look like you could use this," she said, handing one to me. I accepted it gratefully. "Rough day. Want to talk about it?" she asked, settling into the leather chair across from my desk. So I talked. I filled her in on the complex merger Crawford Financial was juggling, the regulations, the internal friction, the strategic conflicts. She listened carefully, asking sharp, thoughtful questions. "You're actually following this?" I asked, surprised. She grinned. "I handled budgeting for our Doctors Without Borders team in Sudan. I had to account for every dollar, every roll of gauze. Whether it's hedge funds or medical tents, money's still money." In that moment, seeing her composed, intelligent, and deeply grounded, I felt something shift inside me. Not desire, not yet, but the recognition of something real, something possible. "What's that look for?" she asked, catching the change in my face. "Nothing," I said, smiling faintly. "Just thinking some Benton men don't recognize a good thing when it's right in front of them." "You mean Gemma chose the wrong sibling?" "Exactly." A flush crept into her cheeks, but her eyes never broke contact. "Watch yourself, Leo. I'm still your soon-to-be ex's sister." "And I'm still your sister's almost former husband," I replied. Messy, isn't it? We let the silence hang there, thick, expectant, filled with the weight of everything unspoken. That Sunday, I woke to the scent of bacon and freshly brewed coffee. Drawn downstairs, I found Delilah at the stove, humming softly as she flipped pancakes. She'd traded her hospital scrubs for jeans and a sky-blue sweater that brought out her eyes. "Morning," I said, grabbing a mug from the counter. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "My shift ended early," she replied, "and I was starving. Thought you might be too." We ate outside on the patio, the crisp air hinting at the start of fall. Inside, on my desk, the divorce documents still sat, unsigned. It wasn't hesitation holding me back, just the sense that the moment to sign hadn't quite arrived yet. "Any big plans today?" she asked, taking a sip of coffee. "Just tying up some paperwork," I said vaguely. "You?" "I'll probably unpack the last few boxes. Maybe go for a jog along the river." After breakfast, we cleaned up side by side. Even though we hadn't lived together long, our movements in the kitchen felt smooth, almost instinctive. At one point, our fingers brushed as I handed her a dish. She looked up and our eyes locked. Something flickered between us. "Leo," she said softly, But before she could finish, my phone rang. It was Dylan, our usual Sunday call. I stepped away to take it, feeling both grateful and disappointed for the interruption. Later that day, I found her curled up on the couch, engrossed in a medical journal. Her hair was pulled up into a casual bun, glasses perched on her nose. It was a quiet, focused look, so different from Gemma's always curated presence. "Delilah," I said, sitting across from her, "we need to talk about what's going on here." She closed the journal and gave me her full attention. "What do you think is happening, Leo?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "I'm still married to your sister. The divorce hadn't been finalized yet, but everything leading up to it felt like navigating a maze blindfolded. "I get that," Delilah said in a steady tone. "I'm not trying to rush into anything." "But something's happening between us," I said. "You feel it too. I know I'm not making this up." She quietly closed her journal and set it aside. "You're not wrong," she said gently. "But that doesn't mean we need to act on it, not immediately." After months of Gemma's manipulations and emotional seesawing, Delilah's honesty was a relief I hadn't realized I needed. No pressure, no drama, just plain-spoken sincerity. "I respect that," I told her. "And I respect you, enough not to make this any more painful where your sister's concerned." Her lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. "My relationship with Gemma has always been tangled," she said. "She's always been the stunning one, the expressive one, the one who could bend situations to her will." "And you?" I asked quietly. "I was the grounded one, the one people relied on. The one who tells the truth," I added. "The one with principles." Her gaze held mine, warm and unwavering. "I've looked up to you for a long time, Leo," she admitted. "Even before any of this happened. You're stable. You mean what you say." "And what I'm saying now," I replied, "is that we shouldn't rush this, as much as I want to. Not until the divorce is over. Not until things are settled." She nodded slightly, then crossed the room and approached me. Leaning down, she kissed me, brief, soft, and intentional. "I'll wait," she whispered, "but not forever." Then she turned and walked away. I sat still, fingers brushing my lips where hers had just been. By the time the sun came up, I knew exactly what I had to do. The paperwork. I'd sign it without hesitation. Some chances are worth the risk. That night, I dreamed of Delilah, not in a passionate haze, but sitting beside me on a porch, our hands entwined, watching the sun sink below the edge of the world. And in that stillness, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. As November settled over Boston, the cold air grew sharp and biting. I signed the final divorce documents, and gradually, a new rhythm began to take shape in my life. During those first 9 days, I kept my distance from Delilah, respectful, deliberate. We both knew what we had was real, but we'd made a pact to hold off until everything was formally concluded. Then, one stormy evening, as rain lashed the windows, the doorbell rang without warning. When I opened it, Gemma stood there, soaked to the bone, shaking, her face bruised and pale. There was a nasty cut above her right eye. "Gemma," I said, instinctively stepping aside. "What happened?" Her voice trembled. "I need to talk to you, Leo. Please." Despite my instincts screaming otherwise, I let her in. Delilah was pulling an overnight shift at the hospital, which left Gemma and me alone in what was now my house. She stood unmoving in the foyer, water dripping from her coat onto the hardwood beneath the glare of the entry light. Up close, the injury looked worse. "Who did this to you?" I asked as I handed her a towel. "Julian," she murmured. "We argued about you." A mix of anger, guilt, and something like vindication hit me all at once. I was furious with a man I barely knew, worried for the woman I'd once loved, and, if I was honest, relieved to be out. "You should report him," I said, voice firm. She shook her head. "It's not that simple. I didn't know where else to go." I walked her to the kitchen and started a fresh pot of coffee. She sat quietly at the island, clutching the mug I placed in front of her, shivering as the warmth spread through her hands. After a moment, she spoke. "I made a terrible mistake, Leo, all of it. Julian, the open marriage, everything. I want to come back." I looked at her, stunned by how easily she said it. "That's not going to happen, Gemma." Her face crumpled. "We've been together 20 years. We share a life, a family. You can't just walk away from that." "I didn't walk away," I replied evenly. "You did. When you chose to sleep with Julian. When you cornered me into choosing between you and a so-called open marriage." Her jaw tightened. "This is about Delilah, isn't it? Are you sleeping with my sister?" The accusation hit like a slap. "That's not your business anymore," I said, keeping my tone measured. She let out a low, bitter laugh. "So that's a yes. You couldn't handle an open relationship, but now you're with my sister? Is this revenge, Leo?" "Leave," I said quietly but firmly. "You hypocrite!" she spat. Tears streamed down her face as she kept talking. "You acted like you were so morally above me when I suggested an open marriage," she cried. "And now you're hooking up with my sister, in the bed we used to share." I stayed composed. First off, I'm a woman. Second, nothing physical has happened between Delilah and me. Third, that bed, it's not ours anymore. And even if something had happened, it wouldn't be the same as what you did. I didn't lie, I didn't cheat, I didn't go behind anyone's back. Just then, the front door opened. Delilah walked in, still in her medical scrubs. She froze when she saw Gemma, her face bruised, her expression livid, and me, stiff with tension. "What's happening?" Delilah asked cautiously, her gaze darting between her sister's injuries and the standoff in the room. Gemma shot back venomously. "Why don't you ask your new boyfriend? Seems like he didn't wait long to replace me." Delilah's eyes widened, but she kept her composure. "Gemma, what happened to your face?" she asked. "Julian did," I answered before Gemma could. "She came here looking for a safe place." Delilah's instincts kicked in. She stepped closer, her voice calm and caring. "Let me take a look at that. It might need stitching." Gemma recoiled. "Don't touch me," she snapped. "How could you, Delilah, with my husband?" "Ex-husband," I corrected, "and there's nothing between us." "Yet," Gemma muttered, her tone bitter and cold. The room thickened with tension. Years of unresolved jealousy simmered in the silence between the sisters. "Nothing happened while you were still living here," I said plainly. "Delilah didn't move in until weeks after you left. Whatever exists now, it took time, and neither of us has acted on it." "And I'm just supposed to buy that?" Gemma scoffed in disbelief. Delilah crossed her arms. "You can believe whatever suits you, but we're telling the truth. Unlike you, we respected our commitments." Gemma turned toward me, her voice smaller now, tinged with desperation. "Leo, come on. We can work through this. Therapy, fresh start, whatever it takes. Don't throw away 2 decades over some emotional fling with my sister." "This was never about Delilah," I replied. "This is about you and me, and the trust you shattered. That trust isn't coming back." "People mess up," she said shakily. "I messed up." "Messed up?" I repeated, stunned. "You made deliberate choices. For 4 months. That's not a misstep, that's a pattern." Delilah took a step closer, carefully. "Gemma, let me treat those wounds. Then we'll figure out where you can go next. Not here, but someplace safe. Away from Julian." Gemma sneered. "Don't pretend like you care. You've always wanted what I had. My toys when we were kids. My prom date. And now, my husband." Delilah's voice shook as she tried to hold herself together. "That's not fair. I've always supported you, even when you didn't deserve it. Like now." Gemma's tone turned razor sharp. "Oh, supporting me looks like moving into my house? Flirting with my husband?" "Ex-husband," I reminded her again, firmly. "And this house isn't yours anymore. It's legally mine. We split everything, remember? You signed off on that." Her face twisted with rage and grief. "You two deserve each other," she hissed. "So self-righteous, so sure you're innocent. But guess what? Everyone's going to know. Our friends, our family. I'll make sure of it." Delilah stood tall, unflinching. "Know what, exactly? That you cheated? That you were asked to leave? That I came back from Africa and needed a roof over my head? Whatever's between us came later, and we still haven't crossed any lines." "Yet," Gemma snarled again, her voice dripping with resentment. "Yet," Delilah repeated steady. "But unlike you, we'll wait until it's legal." Without warning, Gemma lashed out and slapped Delilah hard across the face. I moved instantly, placing myself between them before anything else could spiral out of control. "That's enough," I said, my voice steady and final. "Gemma, you need to go now." She shot me a venomous look, tears streaking her face. "And if I don't?" she asked, her voice trembling with rage. "I'll report what you did to Delilah to the police," I responded without raising my voice. "And right after that, I'll be calling my lawyer to initiate a restraining order." Her eyes darted between us, scanning for hesitation. She found none. With a sharp exhale, she snatched her purse from the floor. "This isn't over," she spat. "You're both going to regret this." My voice remained low but firm. "The only thing I regret is not seeing who you really were sooner." The door slammed shut behind her, and a heavy silence filled the room. Delilah and I remained where we stood, the echoes of the confrontation still hanging in the air. I gently reached out, brushing her cheek where the color hadn't yet faded. "You okay?" I asked. She gave a small nod and leaned ever so slightly into my hand. She always had a volatile side. "I hate that you got pulled into this," I said, the apology in my voice unmistakable. Delilah looked up, calm and unshaken. "Don't be," she said. "This is where I want to be." Even with Gemma's parting words still ringing faintly in my ears, I felt certain, absolutely certain, that what Delilah and I had wasn't something built on bitterness or convenience. It was real. It had grown slowly, carefully, and honestly. 6 months passed, one season giving way to another. Winter gave in to spring, and Boston settled into the thick warmth of summer. The divorce was finalized without disruption. Whatever advantage Gemma thought she had evaporated the moment she put her hands on Delilah. Delilah and I didn't rush into anything. We waited until the ink on the legal documents had dried. For a while, we kept our relationship to ourselves, not because we were ashamed, but because we understood how tangled the family dynamics already were. Dylan and Ryan, grown now, both of them, took the news of the divorce with more grace than I expected. "Sometimes people drift apart," one of them said during a call. "That's just life." When I finally told them about Delilah, they were surprised, naturally. But there was no resistance. "Mom made her choices," Dylan said over video chat. "You deserve happiness, Dad." Ryan, always the introspective one, chimed in, "Delilah's great. Just give us a bit to wrap our heads around it." That was more than I could have asked for. Not long after, Gemma relocated to Chicago for a curator position at the Art Institute. From what I heard through mutual friends, her career was flourishing, but she remained single. Julian had disappeared from her life shortly after the incident, which, whether she saw it or not, was likely for the best. Today, Delilah and I hosted a small backyard gathering. Both my sons were visiting for the summer, and Delilah's parents had flown in from Arizona. Initially, her parents were unsure, even wary, but watching Delilah happy, truly happy, gradually softened their doubts. Her joy said more than we ever could. "To new beginnings," I said, raising a glass as we all sat around the patio. "And to honesty," Delilah added, her eyes locking with mine, still capable of disarming me with their warmth. Later, while people mingled and the evening settled in, Dylan approached me at the grill. "You know, Dad," he said, his eyes on Delilah laughing across the yard with Ryan. "At first, I didn't know what to make of all this. Dating Mom's sister, that's a lot." I nodded slightly. "Yeah, it is. But now," he continued, "now I get it. You and Delilah, it just works. No drama, no games, just respect." His words stopped me for a moment, because he'd named it exactly. Respect. That was the foundation of everything Delilah and I had built. Not fantasy or need, but mutual trust, honesty, and a shared promise not to repeat old mistakes. That night, after everyone had gone and the stars blanketed the sky, Delilah and I sat quietly on the porch swing. Her head rested gently against my shoulder. "Move in," I said, breaking the quiet. "No more acting like the guest room is yours when your folks visit." She let out a soft chuckle. "You sure? It's only been 6 months." "I'm sure," I said, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "We've spent enough time living by everyone else's rules." She looked up at me, her expression suddenly serious. "Any regrets?" I thought about it. "I regret that Gemma got hurt. I regret not seeing the cracks sooner. But you?" I shook my head slowly. "Meeting you, loving you, I'll never regret that. Some stories start messy, doesn't mean they're wrong." She kissed me then, a quiet affirmation beneath the summer night. Some might call our story scandalous, a man divorced from one sister, now in love with the other. But they don't know what we know. This isn't scandal. It's redemption.